It's my pleasure to welcome Jordana Cutler, the Public Policy Director at Facebook Israel, also responsible for the Jewish diaspora, for an interview with Herb Kanan, the Jerusalem Post's senior contributing editor.
Jordana, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, in a recent article in the Post where you were featured as one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world, you said about your job, and you are the head of public policy for Facebook Israel and the Jewish diaspora. You said that you represent Facebook to Israel and Israel to Facebook. What does that mean exactly? What does it mean to represent Israel to Facebook?
Thank you so much for asking that, because it gives me an opportunity to explain to everyone really how I see my job. First, my job, of course, here in Israel and with Jewish communities around the world is to explain Facebook's policies and things Facebook is doing in terms of improving things on our platform, things that we would like to do, and really positive initiatives that we're doing. But on the other hand, inside the company, part of my job is to be a representative for the people here in Israel and the voice of the government for their concerns inside of our company. Our policy teams are located in many different countries around the world, and we want to make sure that we know what's happening on the ground. We can't do that if we're only sitting in California. So we have teams of people made up of, people like myself who are speaking on behalf of many different countries and communities. And in my case, that means people here in Israel and the Jewish diaspora.
Do they listen?
Of course they do, and I think that's one of the most exciting parts about my job is I have an opportunity to really influence the way that we look at policy and explain things on the ground. One of the best examples of that, for example, is the recent policy update that we did on harmful stereotypes, which is a way that we wanted to make sure that we're really focusing our work on anti-Semitism in a much better way. And so what we did was listen to Jewish communities around the world and make changes to our policies so that we were impacting the way that people feel on Facebook.
Can you explain that policy a little bit? I mean, I'm not sure everybody understands what happened.
Of course. Facebook has always taken the fight against anti-Semitism very seriously. So if we zoom out for a second, anti-Semitism rising around the world, something that we take very seriously. The way that people are influencing, speech in the real world also then comes into impact online. And we want to make sure that what we're doing is addressing anti-Semitism not only in our community standards, which we do in our hate speech policies, but also in many different policies. The way we look at bullying and harassment, coordinating harm, violence and incitement, not allowing dangerous organizations organize hate on Facebook, in addition to working with law enforcement around the world. And so what my voice brings to that discussion is, do we need to have better conversations in the company on how Jewish communities around the world feel safe on Facebook? One of those was changing our policies to not allow hate speech against Jews when it comes to attacking them based on the idea that Jews run the world, run governments, run Hollywood, run the media, because we knew that that was impacting people online. And so I brought together different groups of Jewish organizations from around the world. We had many different roundtables, and over the course of about a year, updated our policies to make sure that we were removing that kind of speech. So that's just one kind of instance where I helped to bring the voice of people into the company.
So how is that done? Like, let's say you have a stereotype about Jews out there on Facebook. How does one get that removed? How do you get that taken down?
Really love that question, because I think people don't realize how much power they have to influence the way content is removed on Facebook. Everybody can report content on Facebook. Every single piece of content, a comment, a page, a profile can be reported by anybody, and that content will be reviewed by one of our human reviewers or by automation, sometimes a combination of both. And we will then see if that content violates our community standards and remove it. It's very important for people to know that just one report can bring down a violating post. I think there's a lot of people that think you need to have large numbers of people reporting things to get it removed, but it really just takes one report to get something that's violating our standards removed from Facebook.
How does the automated response team work? I mean, I can imagine, people can read something, they can say, well, this doesn't work, this is stereotypical, but how does it work with artificial intelligence automation?
So we're working really hard to try to remove hate speech from Facebook before people have to see it. We know that there's a harm when you see something that's hate speech, and we want to try to prevent that. Now, again, it's something that we're working on. It's not something that we're perfect on in every language, but if we look at some major languages, English, for example, of course, is one of them, we're constantly working to train artificial intelligence to be able to see content that is violating our hate speech standards before anyone sees it, before people report it, and then remove it from our platform. Sometimes we use use that technology to flag posts that will then be seen by a human reviewer who will then make a distinction. Hate speech is really difficult. Automation is something that we were really good at with photographs, pornography, nude images, for example. But hate speech requires a lot of context. When you say something, is it a joke? Is it in the context of a page that's sharing that content to condemn something, to educate against anti-Semitism versus to celebrate it? And so that nuance is much more difficult. Right now, we just released in our transparency report that over 85% of the hate speech that we remove, we caught it before people were able to see it. That's a number that, of course, we would like to increase over time. And we're continually adding more languages and improving the technology so that we can try to get hate speech down. This includes, of course, anti-Semitism before people have to see it.
I mean, over the summer, there was a big brouhaha with Facebook, and there were calls for boycotts because there was the Holocaust denial post that weren't posted, weren't being taken down on time. Facebook then came out, I think it was last month, and they instituted a new policy. Can you tell us a little bit about that policy?
Sure. Well, I want to zoom out for a second and just say that there is a lot of Holocaust denial that we remove from Facebook. And so I think it's just important for people to understand that when people go and mock the Holocaust, call for another Holocaust, call for genocide against the Jewish people, we remove that content from Facebook. What I was mentioning earlier about the policy development that we just announced a month ago goes back about a year ago. It started when I brought together a group of Jewish communities in the United States. We then expanded that to Europe to really talk about what elements of our policy we could improve to help take down more anti-Semitism. And we really zeroed in on harmful stereotypes against Jewish people, which includes Jews run the world, Jews run the media, etc. And so that policy development was in line for about a year, wasn't necessarily connected to calls for boycotts, which of course we listen and consider what people are upset about with Facebook, but that specific policy was something we've been working on for a year.
Okay, great. Jordana, thank you very much. I appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much.